STAKK Nation, welcome back to the channel. It's your boy Brazen.
And your boy Double O.
Double O.
Champion.
What's going on, champion?
Good to be back.
That is the correct answer. Okay. How is your day feeling?
Oh man, can't wait to do this, man. I have to say, since we've been doing this, I've actually been learning a lot about the world that we live in, the economy, and everything, man.
Yes,
it's a crazy
sir.
world out there.
Yes, sir. It is, it's interesting, man, because when you start, I would say part of it kind of stems from Bitcoin. When you start learning about Bitcoin, when you start exploring Bitcoin and you start going down this rabbit hole, the things that you can come across are just absolutely incredible. You know?
Say that again. Absolutely incredible.
It only makes me wonder, what kind of person was Satoshi?
It must have been an economist. It must have been an historian. It must have been a pastor.
You gotta understand, dude.
A priest.
When you write 9 pages of code, right? And no one is able to defeat it. Governments are not able to defeat it. Okay? You're a freaking winner. Okay, that's what I'll say to that. You're a freaking winner. Okay? And today we're going to be talking about globalization. Okay? Obviously, due to the current geo-economic situations, right? We can clearly tell that our world is changing direction. We're in a different era. Okay? When it comes to many different things, right? And globalization is one of those big areas where we think we're going to be definitely seeing changes, right? So let's discuss this one. Currently, well, let me roll back here real quick before we jump into this, because we know this is not the first time that we've seen some sort of globalization before, all right? Yeah. But this time around, there is something that is different from any other time that there's been, I guess, a reset of global relationships, right? Correct. We have Bitcoin currently at a $558 billion market cap, right? Making about 44% of the total value of all cryptocurrencies. Bitcoin has all the characteristics of hard money. This is what it's all about. This is why it's here, right? It's a superior asset according to Fidelity Investments. I didn't say it. Okay. Fidelity said it. It's right there, right? We already know Bitcoin is making a dent in the global financial system. Here are some of those characteristics I'm talking about when we're talking about hard money, okay? When you look at it from a perspective of storage and security, right? Bitcoin exists only digitally, right? You have a wallet. No one can... Physical force is no longer a thing if you're trying to rob someone. So this is a higher level of security. Blockchain technology, right? And the decentralized structure of Bitcoin itself provides a level of security that we've never seen before. I would say that. Anonymity, of course, there's privacy there, right? We already know this thing. It's a method of payment. You can make payments with Bitcoin already, right? Over the Lightning Network, or you could just do it directly on chain. You know what I mean? It's not advisable, but use Lightning. So we see now that this thing is providing everything that money is supposed to be with none of the downside. I mean, yeah, I would say none of the downside. What do you think of that, sir?
Well, it's doing that and more. I think the more people educate themselves about Bitcoin and they realize the impact that Bitcoin makes to their day-to-day life, even though there's still the argument about energy, they realize that, oh, wait a second, do I get an opportunity to get my sovereignty back? Do I get an opportunity to actually own my assets and not some enterprise? Because as you learn about the system that we all live in, you tend to realize that you're just pawn on the chessboard. But you want to be your own king, your own queen of your own domain. How do you get back to that point?
Hey, I think that is where we need something that is an asset that puts everyone on a level playing field. If we look here, we see a comparison chart here of Bitcoin against something like gold and fiat, of course. That would be any, sort of money by decree. And we can see that when it comes to fungibility, portability, durability, everything that is important about money, right? The others have it as well, right? In different variations. But one of the biggest things about money is that sovereign piece right there, which is very important, right? Now, we know that governments like to maintain control. It's best for them in that way. But look, man, I think considering where we are right now, we're definitely going to be needing a different rail system, if you will, for global transactions. Double up.
Yeah. That's actually another thing that Bitcoin tries to solve that
Right.
governments do not want solved, which is the borderless situation, right? You're
Right.
able to control your government and citizens of your country through the fiat and the policies that you create. Kind of like what the Feds are doing with the US dollar now. They
Right.
create inflation, they create deflation, they do whatever they want to do with the money. And Bitcoin said, no, you're supposed to be able to retain the value of your assets without it being depreciated by somebody at some office somewhere making
Absolutely.
decisions, right?
The biggest thing right now is this globalization, which we're talking about, right? So let's see. What would you say? How would you break it down? Because if you ask me about globalization, right, I would just say, well, it seems like at a certain point in time, we got to this point where technology advanced so much, right? You start getting things like the phone, cars, airplanes, and this kind of shrunk the wall and made us interconnected, especially in trade. How would you put it?
Yeah, and you just made a great point there. Trade is the biggest thing everybody want to talk about when it comes to globalization. You know,
Right.
you could be in America and you can get your products all the way from China, all the way from Taiwan, all the way from the Philippines without you having to manufacture it. That's globalization. That's the globalization that everybody knows. But when you
Right.
talk about globalization is also change of culture, change of art. You know, I went to an Afghan restaurant the other day. I got to experience the Afghan food, the culture, and the way, you know, the way they communicate. That was learning about another culture. So exchange of culture. Movies, you know, people watch Nigerian movies and they've never been to Nigeria. You know, we can talk about that forever. So
Yeah.
yeah,
Now,
globalization as a whole. Yeah.
the interesting thing about that is that as globalization, it's just funny to think. Well, not really funny because every time it came to an end, it was very tragic. It's interesting to think that this idea of people connecting and building trade relationships across the globe has been created and broken multiple times.
Multiple
right?
times. Multiple
And
times.
like the history of this situation, what are some of the times where you think, or at least noteworthy times, right, of where of where globalization was essentially reset? If we take it down memory lane, sir.
Yeah, man, history lesson, right? It's always
Right.
good for the soul.
Hey,
So
man, I love
nobody
a
ever
history
talks
lesson.
about nobody ever talks about globalization when Africa was doing it, right? When King Musa was taking gold and basically destroying destroying entire empires with
Right.
getting too much gold there. But you know what? Let's talk about the most recent history. 1919, that was the old what's it called? Treaty of Versailles.
Yeah,
That
Treaty of
got
Versailles,
broken.
yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
right. Right before World War One, right? Boom, war break loose just because of all of that, right? And at this point, this was Europe. You could travel across Europe, no issues
Right.
at all. And then World War Two broke down as well. And after that, World War Two was when we had the that was another treaty. Uh, and that basically allowed us to say, you know what, US dollar is going to be the currency of exchange globally. You know, these countries came together and said, you know
No,
what,
but
the US dollar is
that wasn't Bretton Woods, was it?
boom. See?
Was it Bretton Woods? Oh,
Yes,
snap,
sir.
man.
Yes,
Hey,
sir.
speaking of this, man, and I think we're gonna be doing it in another video, but the meeting that all the Spanish countries are having, all because they miss Bretton Woods.
It's actually
bro.
so scary because it seems like every time we've had the end of one form of globalization, we've had some kind of world war,
Yeah,
which is
absolutely.
crazy. But funny enough, though, World War III was not really a war. It was China getting into the question in the 70s, 80s, and 90s.
Right.
Russia finally trying to get along, even though we didn't really get along, and we started doing trade with Russia. You know, Germany and Russia were now trading, even though they were enemies initially. And that was globalization, let's say 3. You know, if people want to call it that. But
Yeah.
now we have this new form of globalization. You know, you hear what's his name talk about the end of an era. You know, we have a new revolution coming on.
I think the fourth turning.
Yeah,
I know
the fourth
there's
turning.
stuff like the fourth
Ray
turning.
Dalio.
There's the stuff Ray Dalio wrote about as well.
Yeah,
Which, man, crazy stuff, man. If that stuff is really what is playing out, I mean, all the evidence points to it.
It's terrible.
So,
Yeah.
but
Yeah.
I think despite everything that they planned, Bitcoin was just kind of like the outlier. Like no one kind of saw that one coming. So it's about factoring that into all of that situation right now.
Yep. So, and each time that happened, there was a change of currency.
Right.
So what's going to be the currency? Because you already see what's going on, right? Russia is like, you know what? We don't want to deal in the dollar anymore. China's like, hey, we have the digital yuan. Let's give that a try. You're like, that didn't work out. We have countries like, Dubai and the rest of them thinking of all the currencies that they can use for exchanges. And the question is, why not Bitcoin?
Now, here's one interesting thing now. With the current state of things, right? We have the war going on right now with Russia, and then you have the implications of that, right? Obviously, Russia was supplying a lot of energy to a bunch of different countries, and we can see now that there is this breakdown, right? Where this situation is not just affecting Europe, but it's also affecting a ton of other countries that were depending on either Ukraine or Russia for resources. And this is definitely causing a rift. You have countries that Russia has demanded that some countries pay for their oil in rubles. So you have countries that will be okay with moving in that direction. Yeah. But then that starts, I guess, opening a window for the US dollar to no longer be the reserve currency. Do you see that threat as well?
Yeah, I think, the values are changing, as we can see here. And each time we've seen this happen, values have changed, right? We use the SWIFT system as the centralized way of controlling transactions across the globe. So you kick Russia out, right? And the West is saying we still want to use the dollar. But then we have China and Russia saying, hey, why are you bullying everybody and forcing everybody to use your currency? Give everybody else a chance. And those that did not have the mouth to talk crap before are now saying, hey, wait a second, we have an opportunity here.
Exactly. Now, one interesting thing is, I think when all of this started going on, we know that there were people, even in the Biden administration, that were kind of pushing for a tougher stance with relationships with China, right? But what the Biden administration eventually did was to kind of come to a middle ground where they reset these relations with China to a point where essentially China is free to transact with Russia still, despite all the sanctions right now, right? Yeah. So like right now, the U.S. is, first of all, a bunch of banks are no longer working with Russia. There's no services for airplanes and things like
Russia,
that.
For example,
right. But China is able to still provide these things to them, and this puts China now in a position where they can make Russia less dependent on the West, if you will. Yeah. This further breaks down the current structure of the global chain, if you will. Yeah. Right.
Russia can still sell its oil to China, no issues at all. And China can in return trade with Russia with no issues.
Exactly. So you now start asking yourself, is the West going to be losing out by letting the
East do whatever the East wants to do?
Exactly. I mean, obviously they cannot make anyone do anything. They're also nuclear powers, but could they have negotiated or handled this situation a bit differently?
We should talk about a few things that are going to cause this new form of globalization, right? We have wealth inequality. That was the 99% campaign.
At the highest
and all that stuff that was going on for a while, right? Yeah. And then we had COVID hit right after that. And COVID literally put a hole. You know what? Let's call it a crack at this point, right? Africa didn't get any of the vaccines. They almost did not get any of the vaccines for the longest. Australia was fine, like, yo, man, we're partners. Why is my vaccines? And then we have, South America that almost did not get any vaccines either. But this was supposed to be partners, right? So COVID did its own damage. And right after COVID, we had the supply chain issues, right? Because here comes this huge demand. And China is still on shutdown. And now there's this question of, okay, do I in-source, on-source or near source? Do I leave China, or do I go to the Philippines, or do I just go to Mexico, get closer, or go to South America? That's another thing, right? And then Russia, Ukraine kicks in. With Russia, Ukraine kicking in, people in India did not even know that Russia, Ukraine was going to impact their wheat, talk less of Africa. So this globalization gets impacted majorly to the point that now we even have an impact on food, not just trade, but food as well, right? And then we have China doing what China, just like you just said, China just tightening things up, saying, you know what, we want to do things our way, and we can't fight back and force them to use the US dollar, right? And then issue gets bigger, boom, we're going through a recession right now. Every other country out there has some major debts.
Yeah, which is the interesting thing about that, because as these poor countries start to default, right? Does this mean that they're pretty much, I mean, this is what usually happens, right? They give them predatory loans, they default on it, and then they pretty much own your country, right?
Yep.
And so you have to imagine how many countries are owing and that would have to default and will be in debt to the IMF forever. That's just, it's sickening.
See, one of the things that has always happened is that they've always either forgiven the loan or adjusted the loan. A good example is now we just threw a major inflation on everybody. So the percentage or the amount that you loan the money for is now more expensive. You can't pay that loan back because now you've had this crazy inflation over time. How am I going to pay it back when I loaned it for 0.01 and now it's 7%?
Here, I want to ask you this. This loan, where are they getting the money from? The person loaning the money. Where are they getting it from?
They're getting it from the World Bank and the IMF. You should ask yourself, who's the World Bank and the IMF?
Look, man, let's not even go down that road, man, because we know where we can find money that is limited in supply, sir. Okay? Hard money, okay, that is going to essentially replace the current system and allow everyone to be one, okay, in this new global economy, right? Being able to access the markets, access capital, no matter where you are. A low barrier of entry, man. All you need is a phone and a connection. Here's the thing. I think as we go into this new phase, like, because everything, especially everything you just explained here right now, Double O, is clearly, is all pointing to slowdowns of the current form of globalization. But we know that this has to pick up again, because I don't think people can just live separately forever in this way, right? You have people who live, you know what I mean, families across the world now. Globalization cannot be rolled back now. But I think as we go into a new system, it would make sense that everyone is on a system like Bitcoin, right? Where everyone can trade across the world, right? With no borders. Now, I understand that this means that transactions could be separated from the dollar, right? And because Bitcoin does not require any connection to the US dollar to transact. This gives people across the globe, really, to be able to participate in the simple thing that we all take for granted in the first world countries, right? Do you think that governments could be seeing this as a threat, right? Especially the US government, as a threat to the US dollar, given that it is currently the world reserve currency, despite the fact that this will benefit so many people across the world.
Yeah, and I think that is the big challenge that the U.S. government has to fight for or fight against. So you have a technology that not only allow you to continue your wealth building or to become the greatest nation on the planet if you want to continue to do that, but it also allow all these other countries that you've used the World Bank and the IMF to take advantage of to kind of get their own sovereign powers back without having to go to war, but you can still trade and still benefit from whatever resources they have to offer, right? So do we relinquish up the greed and say, you know what, you can trade in Bitcoin, we want your resources, let's trade in Bitcoin. No one can accumulate as much Bitcoin than the US. That's a fact.
No one can, because they pretty much robbed a bunch of people with a Bitcoin. But let's not go down that road. This, when I looked at this chart, first of all, okay, let me share this chart with you. This chart here we found from how much net when I was looking at this chart here, one of the biggest things is, first of all, I looked at it and I was like, holy crap, we're so early. We're so early. Looking at this chart, everything in green is where Bitcoin is currently legal, right? You can use Bitcoin, you can trade with Bitcoin, you could do anything you want with Bitcoin in the green areas. Now, the orange areas are neutral. Maybe, maybe not, right? It just depends on, maybe it's an access situation. Then you have the areas where things are restricted, that is going to be in pink, right? And light pink there. And that's only about 3% of the world, about 7 countries where Bitcoin usage is restricted. 40% of the rest of the world is pretty much neutral to Bitcoin or legal. And you have 53% of the world, which is pretty much like all of Africa, that is still undecided on Bitcoin. There is no word on that yet, except for Nigeria. Nigeria, I feel they need to jump the gun on this one. Why is that?
I will say one thing though. Inclusion, right. Number one, right? As you were showing that map, the welfare countries tend to be the ones that are undecided, right? They also seem to be the developing countries, a lot of them, right? And those are the ones that need Bitcoin the most, because Bitcoin allows them to regain their sovereign powers back, right? And have control of their own resources. It also allows all the other countries to have transparency in government. You see where your government funds are going, right? That is very, very critical. Because if you're going to go to this new form of globalization, what caused the last one to fail is money being printed out for a bunch of illicit stuff that nobody knew about, that was destroying nations left and right. There's also accountability, right? Absolutely. I can't just print money and go to war. I can only use what I got. So I think it would limit the amount of wars that we have.
Yeah.
All right.
You know, what's his name? Saifuddin Amos. I saw him on. He was on a Lex Freeman podcast, and he was saying, you cannot have fiat without wars, and vice versa. It's interesting, and I guess there's not really a way to argue against that, because we have not seen a situation where there's been fiat and no war. So.
We just print out a lot of money for.
Yeah. So at this point in time, the way I look at it,
we printed out for the Iraq War, then the Afghan War, and now we're printing money out again for the Ukraine War. It's non-stop.
Exactly. I know that when you change something, there's going to be consequences, but at this point in time, I think it's worth trying. The current system is seeming to be slowing down, seeming to be breaking down, especially with the conflicts there in Russia, right? Yeah. But as we come to the new phase of globalism, right? What is it going to be? Do you think we're going to make the right choices? Because I think Bitcoin needs to be in that equation. What do you guys think? Do you guys think Bitcoin needs to be in the equation as well? Double, or what do you think?
Well, I think if you ask Double O, you would automatically know that Double O is going to say yes. It needs to be part of the equation. But for the audience, though, leave your comments. Let us know what you think. I personally think Bitcoin needs to be part of the equation.
Listen, man, I think that we're in very interesting times. I don't know what's going to happen next, but if anyone tells you they know, man, I think they're lying. You know what I mean? There's never been another time in history like this. Okay? It seems like everything that is wrong is going wrong. But there's just this, I don't know, what would you call them? Sparks of promise, right? Bitcoin technology at an all-time high. You know what I'm saying? It's incredible, right? This was a fun one. Any final thoughts, Double O?
Hey, for the new subs, thanks for liking and thanks for subscribing. Look forward to seeing more of you guys soon.
Until next time, Brazen out.
Double O.